Let's look at an intro to subtracting negative numbers. Um, so first of all, we want to check out the understanding that subtraction is just adding the opposite. Okay, so we're going to take a look at some of the questions that we're presented with, and all we're doing is we're adding the opposite of what we've got. Okay, so which expression here below is equivalent to half minus negative 8. Okay, now one of the things that we want to look at is that when we've got two signs right here, subtracting something, right? We're going to look at these two signs right here. If we're subtracting a negative, we're going to look at that as just bringing them together, and that's the same as adding a positive, right? Okay. A lot of people look at this idea of you've got a parentheses in the middle of the two and just bringing the two together. That's one way that a lot of kids have figure this one out. If we have subtracting a positive, well, that's just subtraction, right? Okay, it's the same as if we had adding a negative, it's just subtraction as well. Again, the same idea being the same sign, some different signs, difference. Okay, so we're going to look at what equivalencies we've got here. Okay, so we've got a half minus negative 8, right? Half minus negative 8 by this is a half plus 8, right? So this is what we're looking at, half plus 8, right? And it should be a very good clue to you to see what's going on right here. If you've got if you have a negative half, you're not starting with a negative half, right? That would actually change the second number, okay? This particular one here is just changing the order of it. Of course, if this was 8 plus 12, then you've got another equivalent as well. It's the same as 12 plus 8, okay? So all we're doing is looking at adding the opposite is what we're doing. Subtraction is adding the opposite, okay? So again, same idea here. We're looking at minus a negative, right, which is the same as a positive. So a different way of writing this would be negative 51 plus 60, right? Okay, negative 51 plus 60, of course, is this option right here. All we're doing is adding the opposite. So you're adding whatever the opposite of this is, okay? Changing the sign. Okay. This one here, subtraction, is adding the opposite. So if you wanted to look at this differently, you're looking at 2 minus positive 35, if you want to look at it like that. It's the same thing, right? So what we're doing now is we're just adding the opposite. So we're looking at it as 2 plus negative 35. Okay? We're just changing the sign right inside here and changing the sign outside. Okay? So a couple of options here. 2 minus negative 35 is not going to work. 2 plus negative 35 was the option that we were looking at. So you're just changing the signs. We'll look at one more just so that we get it home. So we've got negative 8.2, right? We've got minus 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the sign on that, and we're going to make it negative 5 on the inside, right? And probably actually rewinding there for a second just so we see what's going on here. This here, what we have here, this 8.2 minus 5, is the same as saying minus positive 5, right? So just for clarity, we're going to put that in there, and now we're going to add the opposite. So instead of subtracting, we're going to add it, but we're going to change the sign on the inside here so that we're clear on it. Okay? And as we can see right there, that's our option right there that matches. All we're doing is adding instead of subtracting and changing the sign on the second number. And moving on to subtracting negative numbers, now that you get the idea of that it's just adding the negative, we can actually do some subtracting of negative numbers. So the idea being that we're adding the opposite, okay? So what we've got here is we now have, if we skip forward, we're going to change the sign here, so we're going to add, and we're going to change the sign on the second number as well, which is plus 6. And as you can see here, same sign, sum, we're actually changing this completely. This is now 3 plus 6, which is equal to 9. Same sign, sum, different sign, difference, right? That doesn't quite work with addition. It's the opposite. It has to be adding the opposite. Okay, so the same sign, sum is with adding, not with subtracting. Okay, looking at a few more again, we're going to do adding the opposite. So we're going to take negative 4, and we're going to change the sign. This is a positive 7 here, right? So we're going to say plus negative 7, right? And what you've seen here now is we have actually changed this into a positive, into a plus, right? We've changed the sign, right? So this is now an addition, and that allows us to combine the two together, right? So this is 7. This is adding the same signs, right? The same signs is 7 plus 4. So 7 plus 4 is 11, right? And we're keeping the bigger sign, right? So that becomes negative 11, right? Because 7 plus 4 is 11, right? So that's where your same sign sum comes in. Okay? So adding the opposite, again, we're starting at negative 5, right? And we're going to, instead of subtracting, we're going to add the opposite, plus 4, so positive 4, right? That's what we're doing, we're adding the opposite. So this is different signs different, so we're going to take the difference of the 2, keep the bigger sign. Keep the bigger sign as a negative. Difference of the 2, 5 minus 4 equals 1. So we've got a negative 1 right here. Okay. And again, we're going to apply the same idea, adding the opposite. 8 plus, and the opposite of negative 3 is positive 3, right? And in this case here, it's just 8 plus 3, which again is 11. This time it's 11. Let's do one more, okay? So again, we're starting at negative 4. We're going to add the opposite, okay? So we're going to change this subtraction to an addition, and we're going to do the opposite to negative 2, which is positive 2. And now we have ourselves negative 4 plus 2. If we apply that, keep the bigger sign is right here, and we just take the difference because they're two different signs, right? 4 minus 2 is 2. We get negative 2 total, okay? Okay, again, a couple of videos there to help you along. The whole idea of this is adding the opposite. You're just changing the sign, adding the opposite, and then you can, of course, apply your same sign sum, different sign difference from the previous skill.